When people applaud for them playing over here, I always imagine that's for me walking up here. Oh boy. What am I doing up here, right? Hey, it is great to be here with you this morning. What a privilege it is. And I look out and I see so many faces and people that I know well, people that I know, and then some people that I don't know very well. And I look forward to having the opportunity to sit down and to get to know each and every one of you that is here this morning. I know that we've had a lot going on here this morning already. And let me back up because I feel like I owe this. We want to be transparent in everything that we do here at First Christian. And I feel like that you need to know where we're headed and what's going on. And if you're a visitor today, please forgive me as we walk ourselves through this. But as we're in the middle of looking for a student minister, I think it's important for you to know where we're at in that stage. And I want to encourage you because we have some exciting things that will take place this week. A couple of months ago, actually about the end of September, we put together a team of about 7 people to begin to look for a student minister to replace myself. And what we did is that we didn't really advertise it like we do normally. Instead, we reached out to a handful of senior ministers at larger churches around the area. And with their friendship and their accountability, we asked them, do you know of anybody, a young person, that you would hire that would make a great youth minister that you would bring onto staff immediately? And so they gave us a list of names, and one by one we began to work ourselves through that list till we came to one individual, one person's name. And we called references, we checked out that. Matter of fact, we went above and beyond that because, you know, everybody that puts down a reference, they're going to put down mom and dad and stuff like that, right? I mean, they're going to put down people that's going to give them a good reference. And so we dug a little deeper and talked to people that this person didn't know that we were talking to. And we had trouble finding any bad stuff. And so we brought him in, and he sat down with our search committee and met for 2 hours. And we asked a lot of questions, and he asked a lot of questions. And at the end of the day, we were satisfied where we were at. And so we invited him back. And this Wednesday, he will be here. And he will eat dinner with us. He'll be down there with us. And then he's going to go out into the student building and teach our 6th grade through 12th grade students. So if you have a student that is in that age, we encourage you to be here that night to meet this young man. And he'll have a teaching time with them, but he'll also have an opportunity to sit down with our students and have a Q&A time. And then immediately after that, about 7:35 out in our student building, we want to encourage you, if you're a parent or just a member, if you want to sit in on this, we're going to have a Q&A time again with you guys as parents and members. And he will be there to answer any questions you might have. And I just ask you to be gentle, okay? All right? But we look forward to it. I think you will be impressed as we were. And again, like I said, that is happening this Wednesday night. And so I want to encourage you to make plans. And if you're a student, if you have a child, make sure that they're here to meet this young man. And so we are moving forward with that. You know, John Hume has spent his life being a peace activist. And he had worked in Ireland, in Northern Ireland. And over the past 30 years, he worked to try to bring peace to the religious and the social places that were going on in Northern Ireland. And over 35 people had been killed in these 30 years. And he worked tireless to try to bring the two sides together to understand what was happening and the differences that we have as people, that it wasn't, it was small in comparison of what we could do together. And in 1998, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And when he got up to accept his award, he had a speech. And in this speech, he said this. Let me read this to you. The quote from John Hume in 1998 of October. Difference is the essence of humanity. Difference is an accident of birth, and it should therefore never be the source of hatred or conflict. Therein lies a most fundamental principle of peace, respect for diversity. And when you stop and you think about that comment, you think about the differences that we have, that a lot of the times as Christians, what keeps us from sharing the gospel, of taking something that we know is so valuable, and that is Jesus himself, and sharing it with people, is because we step across that imaginary line and we have differences, don't we? Intimidation, because they're not like me. We were married for, my wife and I, we just got married, maybe a year, maybe two. And my oldest sister had moved to Vancouver, Canada, and we thought, you know what, this would be a great time to go see her. And so we jumped on a plane and we flew up to Vancouver to visit her and her husband. And we went down to Seattle, Washington for the weekend. And they had drove up there from Joplin, Missouri. That's where they lived. And so they had their car, and it still had Missouri license plates. And here we were in downtown Seattle, not knowing anybody. And we were walking around, or actually we were driving at this stage. And we come across, and on the passenger side, my sister's in the front seat, Carrie's on behind her on the passenger side. And all of a sudden this car begins to honk and wave. And they roll down their windows, and it's a car full of ladies, and they're like, hey, we're from Missouri too. And they were in a car, and it had their license plate. You know, have you ever done that? Yeah, some of you are like, yeah, I'm guilty of that. All right, yeah, we're from Missouri. And they start talking, and my sister goes, we're from Joplin. And they go, we're from Joplin. All right, and my brother-in-law grew up in Joplin. He's like die-hard Joplin guy. All right, and so he wants to find out where they are. He wants to know who they are. But my brother-in-law at that time, early in his youth, did not look like a normal guy. All right, he had the black laced up military boots that went to his knees, probably jeans that had holes in them, but his hair was different. All right, it had like this long, straggly goatee, all right, that you see around today. It's in style now, right? But back in the 90s, that was not it. And as a matter of fact, you kind of looked at him, you kind of thought, this guy's kind of homey, right? And so he jumps out of the car, and they couldn't see him. He jumps out of the car, he runs over to the side, he starts to cross the street, and this car full of ladies look at him, and in terror in their eyes, I hear one of them in the back seat go, 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 go! And they punch it and take off. And my brother-in-law is standing there like, what? What just happened? You know? Why did they do that? Why? And we laugh because we would have done the same thing, right? Because he looked different. He looked scary. And so our differences sometimes is a wall to keep us from communicating the love of Jesus Christ, doesn't it? And we have got to get rid of that. We've got to figure out a way to be able to handle our indifferences so that Jesus Christ can use us in a mighty way. If you have your Bibles today, if you have a tablet or your phone, turn up to or flip on to John. John chapter 1. Oh man, we got to go. We got a lot to cover here. In John chapter 1, and I'm going to read this starting with verse 43, and you get a sense of indifference. Jesus is out and he's collecting his disciples. And John tells us that the next day Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, follow me. Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, we have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about the one who the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Verse 46. Nazareth, can anything good come from there? Nathanael asked. Come and see, Philip said. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching him, he said to him, here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. How do you know me? Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you. Then Nathanael declared, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. And Jesus said, you believe because I told you you were under the fig tree. You will see greater things than that. And then he added, very truly I tell you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Now there's a lot of things that are going on in this text, and I just want to point out one thing, and I think this is kind of funny to stop and to look at this, and Nathanael's response. That he is all in with Jesus. All because Jesus said what? I saw you under the fig tree. I'm in. That must be him, right? I mean, think about that. No walking on water, no healing somebody that's blind, right? No turning water into wine. It's, I saw you under the fig tree. That must be it. I'm in. And I look at that and I want so bad to be like Nate, right? That I don't want God, I don't need God to do great things for me to be all in. And so many times, don't we? We get into this habit of wondering why God's not doing greater things in our lives. And God says, I just need obedience. I need your faith. And God's acts don't sustain us. What sustains us is our faith in Jesus Christ. A moment with Jesus changes everything. And one little moment for Nathanael changed everything. A moment with Jesus changes our indifference to intentionality with others. We go from knowing who Jesus is to actually following him. It's an action. And Nathanael responds to that. And Jesus, when a moment is spent with Jesus, Jesus changes our indifference so that we look at people and we're intentional about spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ. But it doesn't come easy. Do you know that? Being intentional with Jesus is not easy. I don't know about you. I'm going to just be honest with you this morning, all right? Being intentional with Jesus is an everyday thing for me. It's every second of every minute of every hour of every day. That if I want to be intentional, if I want to spend a moment with Jesus, I have to be intentional. I just don't wake up and Jesus is right there and I'm just walking with Jesus and everything's great. Ever been there? How many of you have ever had moments in your life when you succeeded and you're walking and the gospel is real and God is real and you're feeling it and you're like, why can't I live in this moment all the time? And all of a sudden the next day you get up and Jesus is far. You're far. Everything that we do has to be intentional. Following Jesus is intentional. You have to be intentional about being in the moment with Jesus. And this is where Nathanael was. And this takes our indifference and he gets rid of it. And we see people the way that Jesus would want us to see. Intentional is hard, but we do it every day, do we not? Our marriage, if you want a good marriage, you have to be intentional. If you want to, high schoolers, how you doing, man? If you want to be a good child, you got to be intentional, don't you? You got to be intentional about obeying your mom and dad, doing what they say, respecting them. Does it come naturally for you, Blake? Oh, no. No, it does not. You have to be intentional. You have to be intentional to be a good neighbor. You have to be intentional to be a good co-worker. You have to be intentional. You know, I work at this on every facet of my life. Why wouldn't I do this with my walk with Jesus Christ? My wife and I never realized this, that this bugged her, but we have double sinks in our bathroom. All right? On the left side of my sink is Lance's stuff. On the right side of her sink is Carrie's stuff. And in the middle is the stuff that we share, like toothpaste and hair products and brushes and combs and stuff. And what are you laughing about? And we shared toothpaste. And I did not realize this happened until recently. Is that when I use the toothpaste, I do not put it back in the middle, I put it on Lance's side. Now, I could sit here and say, okay, it's so far away, right? But I thought, you know what, I don't believe that, so I'm going to be intentional, and sure enough, I did do that. All right, matter of fact, I didn't just leave it on my side, I took it to other rooms. She'd be like, where's the toothpaste? And so I had to be, you know what, if this is going to cause stress in our life, I need to be intentional about the toothpaste being in the middle, right? Why wouldn't we do this in our relationship with Jesus Christ? In the morning when I get up, I intentionally want to spend time with him. You know, the theme throughout the course of the gospel in the New Testament is that we are to reflect, be examples, to imitate Jesus. Right? That is who we're supposed to be. I have some scripture here that I'd like to share with you on what Jesus is. And when it talks about imitating and be an example. Jesus said in John chapter 13, verse 15, he says, "For I give you an example that you should also do as I did to you." Whoa. John 15, verse 4, Jesus is talking about a branch, and he's talking about a vine, and he's talking about fruit, and it's in his example, it's imitating, okay? It's being an example. Listen to what he says. "Remain in me, and I also in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither you can bear fruit unless you remain in me." Paul carries this on in Romans 13:14. He says, "But put on the Lord Jesus Christ." In 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1, Paul goes on to put it this way, "Be imitators of me as I imitate Christ." Do you get that? Paul is saying, imitate me as I imitate Christ. Who are you imitating? Because your examples should be leading somebody else to Christ. Right? You and me are to imitate Jesus to the lost. The lost is not looking for perfect people. They're looking for authentic Christians. And the problem with our churches today is that we look around and we're chasing the same things that lost people are. And they look at that and they go, why would I want that? We're to imitate Jesus. So, a moment with Jesus changes our indifference. And we begin to see people in a different light. And so here real quickly this morning, what I want to do is just ask several questions. Questions that we need to ask ourselves. If we're going to have a moment with Jesus where Jesus takes our indifference so that we are intentionally looking at people in a different light so that we can spread the gospel of Jesus Christ, so that we can reach the lost outside these doors, we need to ask ourselves some questions. Here's the first question that we need to ask. What people do you struggle to value? Go back to your scripture. In verse 45, Philip finds Nathanael and he tells him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets were also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." And I love Nate's response here, right? I don't know what's going on in Nate's life, but listen to what he says. Nazareth? Can anything good come from there? Now, I have no reason to believe that Nazareth had a bad reputation. Nathanael's comment might reflect some kind of small-town rival. I don't know. Sand Springs, Sapulpa, we're all brothers, right? We get along. Canaan and Nazareth, only a few miles apart. Young men willing to think, willing to think that anyone from another town is above them, especially other men from a rival town. And so they cast their nose. Maybe that is what is going on here. Maybe that is what led Nathanael to say, Nazareth, what good come from there? I don't know. You know, I grew up in southeast Kansas in Erie High School. Erie, Kansas was a small town, but 6 miles to the south of us was an even smaller town named St. Paul, Kansas. And I don't know if you know southeast Kansas very well, but people from St. Paul and Erie do not get along. But when I was in high school, there were some certain young women that some of my buddies and I were drawn to from St. Paul. All right? And so we found ourselves trying to visit St. Paul, and the boys there did not like it. Matter of fact, there was this one guy that was about the same size as me, but he had a wild look in his eye, which scared the dickens out of me, right? His name was Scott Bourne. And I remember one time we went to a basketball game to watch some of these girls that we knew play. And we sit on the opposite side, not on St. Paul's side, all right, but we sit on the opposite side. And here comes Scott Bourne and his thugs, and they sit behind us. And they caused all kinds of troubles. And I thought, oh boy, my parents are going to be so proud of me because things are going to go down, right? And of course, the administrators came over and broke it up before it got violent. But to this day, I still don't want to go to St. Paul because of Scott Bourne. What people do you struggle to value? Because they're from a different place? Because they talk different, they look different, they act different? Who do you struggle to value? Are you like Nathanael? Here's another question that we got to ask ourselves. What preferences have become obstacles for you to see other people? What preference? We all have preferences, don't we? Do we not have preferences? Carrie Newfalk talks about 7 things that Christians should give up to reach the unchurched people. Now, I'm going to run through this list of 7 things that, remember, these are our preferences, right? Do not get offended. I did not write this list, okay? But what I would love for you to do is listen to this list. He says that these are the 7 things that we as Christians should give up to reach people that don't know Jesus, right? That should be what we want to do, right? If I have something in my life that's keeping somebody from loving Jesus or seeing Jesus, I want to throw it out. I want to get rid of it. What about you? And so he writes these 7 things. And what I want to ask you to do is listen to this and pray about it. And if you're struggling with one of these things, man, deal with it, right? Give it to God. Let him work through your life. Here we go. Here's the first one. Music. Music. I'm going to make a bet that it's safe to assume that none of us, that we all in here have different preferences of music, right? Do you know what the church fights about the most? Is worship. How sad is that? The thing that we come to lift up our voices to praise the King of Kings is the thing that we fight the most about. How sad is that? Do you know what? Here, I'm going to share a secret with you. The style of worship that we do here at First Christian is not my preference. Now you're all sitting there going, I wonder what that would be. I'm not telling you. But it doesn't matter, right? As long as we are glorifying the King and we're reaching the lost. Let's go on here. So we have music. We have politics. This might not have been a divisive issue a couple of generations ago, but I can promise you now it is, right? Just check out your social media feed. Politics matters, but it will never change the world the way the gospel can. Style. Carrie says we must give up style. It seems likes and dislikes of Christians run deep and wide these days. We all have opinions on everything from the kind of coffee we should have in our classrooms to the color of paint on our walls. Auditorium or sanctuary. Gym or family life center, right? Styles. Reggie Joyner says this, focus on who you want to reach, not on who you want to keep. Think about that. Church is for you, not about you. Buildings. This is another issue that we have sometimes. Buildings. Sometimes we get more attached to our buildings than we do our mission statement. It's just a building. Money. And we don't even have time to go into money. It's not a tithing sermon, so we'll save it for another day. Time. He also goes on and says that time, being the church is about a lot more than showing up for an hour on Sunday. If you're really going to reach the lost, it means you got to give time. You got to give of your time. Authentic Christianity is more about what we give than what we get from it. More about what we give than what we get from it. Here's the last thing that Carrie says, and that this is our lives. Christians should be the most generous and selfless people on the planet. The gospel calls us to die to ourselves so that others may live and put something bigger than ourselves above ourselves. What happens when we remove the preferences and we start actually looking at people like Jesus did, right? What preferences have become an obstacle for you looking at people? Are they preferences that glorify God? Or are they preferences that remove you from God? Here's the last question I would ask. If we want to go from knowing who Jesus is to following Jesus, if we want to spend a moment with Jesus that changes our indifference towards people so that we can be intentional about sharing the gospel, here's the last question. What behaviors tell others that they matter to you? What behaviors do you have in your life that tell other people they matter to you? I love verse 46. After Nathanael is told who Jesus is, and he has his great statement of Nazareth, what good can come from there, Philip doesn't engage him in a debate, does he? He doesn't argue with him. And I think we can learn a lot from Philip in this brief conversation that he has. Instead, what does Philip do? In verse 46, he simply says, "Come and see." Philip does not argue with Nathanael, but instead invites him to come and see the man himself. And we can learn from that. Barclay says this: not very many people have ever been able to argue into Christianity. The only way to convince a man of the greatness of Christ is to confront him with Jesus. I cannot change anybody, but Jesus can. And that's what we need to do. What an example that Philip gives us here. Let me ask you a question this morning. As you go through your life and you're intentionally living your life for Jesus, you're reflecting, you're being an example. When's the last time that you said to somebody, "Come and see Jesus"? When's the last time that you invited somebody to see the man? What behaviors tell others that they matter to you? This morning, as our praise team comes up and closes us with a song of invitation, a closing song. I just graduated high school, and I was in the summer before I headed off to Ozark, and I drove back into Erie, Kansas. I was on a date. I was getting ready to pick up this girl to go watch a movie. And in Erie, we had one of these gas stations that you see that we have them here. They had the booths that you could go and grab food and sit down at, you know. And in the back was one of my buddies, graduated with me. And he was back there, and you could tell that he was upset, distraught, and he had been crying. And he wasn't just my friend, he was actually my cousin who lived down the road from me. And we had spent all 12 years going through school together. And as the closer I moved to Jesus and was getting ready to go into ministry and go to Ozark, the further we got apart from each other. His compass was not leading him the way I was leading. And so I saw Raymond, and he was sitting in the back. And I knew he was upset, but I had to get gas. I had to go pick up my date. I had a date. I had a movie to catch. I was on a time schedule. And I looked at Raymond, and I don't know if he saw me. He never looked up. I never made eye contact with him. And so I had convinced myself that he didn't see me, and I decided that I would catch him somewhere else. I'd catch him at Grandma's house. Family get-together, right? I'll see him another time. I'll find out what's going on in Raymond's life. And I went on my date, and that was the last time I saw him. He was killed in Arkansas in a car wreck 3 weeks later. And that moment has haunted me all my life. I have no idea, and I have no idea where Raymond was. But the problem is I never said, "Come and see." I never sat down and found out where he was and what was going on in his life. I never took the opportunity. And I looked at Raymond, and I knew that we were going in different paths, and that he probably, and I convinced myself he probably wanted nothing to do with Jesus. I wasn't like Philip. What behaviors keep you away from people that desperately need to know who Jesus is? Come and invite. Come and see who this man is. Today we're going to offer an invitation.